The late afternoon sun glared across the quiet highway, turning the asphalt into a wavering mirage. Special Agent Maya Carter of the FBI drove calmly, her badge tucked safely in her blazer pocket, her mind occupied with the debrief she had just left. She was heading home, exhausted yet proud after weeks of cracking a case involving a trafficking ring. Her thoughts broke when flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. A local police cruiser pulled sharply behind her, siren blaring. Confused, Maya slowed and pulled over. She hadn't been speeding, nor had she violated any traffic law. The officer approached quickly, his posture rigid, his hand resting near his holstered weapon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a permanent scowl under his hat. His nameplate read Danvers, "Step out of the vehicle." "Now," he barked, his tone not of protocol but of hostility. Maya remained composed. "Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop?" She replied firmly but respectfully. Danvers sneered. "Don't play smart with me. Get out of the car before I drag you out." Maya took a slow breath, reached into her jacket, and calmly presented her credentials. "I'm Special Agent Carter, FBI." But instead of acknowledgement, his eyes narrowed, his voice dripped with disdain. "I don't care what kind of badge you flash. Around here, your kind doesn't tell me what to do." And before she could react, he drew his gun, aiming it directly at her chest. The air grew heavy, the sound of cicadas buzzing in the background as Maya froze, her training kicking in. She knew one wrong move could escalate everything. But this wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was something far darker. The barrel of Officer Danvers' gun glinted under the setting sun. Maya Carter stood still, her hands slightly raised, her badge still visible in her palm. Years of FBI training told her to remain calm, to de-escalate, but she could see something in his eyes, anger mixed with prejudice. "You think that little piece of metal makes you untouchable?" Danvers snarled. "Not on my highway. You people think you can waltz into our towns and act superior." Maya's voice was steady, measured. "Officer Danvers, put the weapon down. You're making a mistake. Call your chief, confirm my identity. There's no need for this." But her reason only fueled his hostility. He stepped closer, finger twitching on the trigger. "Don't tell me how to do my job. Around here, I decide who stays and who goes." A small crowd began to gather at the edge of the road. Drivers slowed, cell phones raised. The sight of a white officer holding a gun to a black woman in professional attire drew instant attention. Whispers rose. Some recorded, others gasped. Maya held her ground. "Every camera here is recording you. Think carefully about your next move." Danvers smirked, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Let them record. The world needs to see what happens when federal suits come sticking their noses where they don't belong." The tension tightened like a coiled spring. Maya knew backup would come eventually, but seconds felt like hours. She calculated her options, her every muscle disciplined against panic. Then, faintly in the distance, the unmistakable roar of multiple sirens approached. Maya exhaled quietly. Reinforcements were on the way, but she had no idea that the man leading them would change everything. The sirens grew louder, echoing across the highway like a warning drumbeat. The onlookers shifted, phones still pointed toward Officer Danvers and Maya. Every second dragged, but then 3 police cruisers skidded onto the shoulder, lights flashing. The doors flew open, and out stepped Chief Raymond Keller, the commanding officer of the precinct, a seasoned leader with 30 years in the force. His presence carried immediate authority. Tall, silver-haired, with piercing eyes, he was known for his zero-tolerance policy on corruption. "Danvers!" the chief's voice thundered before his feet even hit the pavement. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Danvers stiffened, but he didn't lower his weapon. "Chief, this woman was acting suspicious, refused my orders. I was taking control of the situation." The crowd hissed and murmured, their phones recording every word. Maya stood motionless, eyes locked on the chief, her badge still raised. "Suspicious?" Keller barked, his eyes darting to the credentials in Maya's hand. "That's a federal badge. Do you have any idea who you're pointing that gun at?" Danvers' jaw tightened. "Chief, with all due respect, people like her—" "Enough!" Keller's voice cracked like a whip, cutting him off. The silence that followed was heavier than the humid evening air. The chief's face reddened with controlled fury. "You just held an FBI agent at gunpoint in front of half the county while citizens filmed every second. Do you realize what that means for this department?" Danvers faltered, sweat beading on his forehead, but pride kept him rooted. "Chief, You were just digging your own grave," Keller said coldly. He took a deliberate step forward, his hand already reaching toward Danvers' chest. The crowd leaned closer, breath held, waiting for what would come next. The scene unfolded like a courtroom drama on the side of the highway. Dozens of phones pointed forward, their tiny red recording lights blinking like watchful eyes. The weight of truth was no longer hidden, it was being documented for the world. Chief Keller closed the distance with slow, deliberate steps. His eyes never left Danvers, whose hand still trembled near the trigger. "Holster your weapon." "Now," the chief ordered, voice sharp with command. Danvers hesitated, pride and fear clashing inside him. "Chief, you don't understand. I said holster it," Keller roared, his voice cutting like a blade. Finally, with a jerk, Danvers shoved the weapon back into its holster. But the silence that followed didn't ease the tension. The damage was already done. Keller's jaw tightened. He stopped directly in front of Danvers, staring at him as though weighing his entire career in a single glance. Then, without warning, Keller's hand shot forward, gripping the metal badge pinned to Danvers' chest. The crowd gasped. "You've disgraced this badge," the chief said, his voice cold, deliberate. "This symbol stands for service and protection, not hatred and intimidation. You've proven you don't deserve it." With one sharp tug, Keller ripped the badge free. The sound of tearing fabric echoed louder than the passing cars. Danvers' face went pale, his mouth opening as though to protest, but no words came. Keller held the badge up for the crowd to see, then dropped it to the asphalt at Maya's feet. The metallic clink rang out like a gavel striking. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others crying out in disbelief. Phones captured every angle. Maya lowered her hands slowly, her eyes locking with the chief's. Justice, it seemed, had just begun. The crowd was electrified. Some clapped, others shouted words of support, while a few simply stood frozen, unsure of what they had just witnessed. For a police chief to strip one of his own in public was something few had ever seen. Danvers staggered back, his chest bare where the badge had once gleamed. His face twisted between rage and humiliation. "Chief, you can't do this out here in front of everyone!" he barked, desperation cracking his voice. Keller's gaze hardened. "The people deserve to see it. They deserve to know that no one is above accountability, not even my own officers." Phones caught every syllable. The footage was already streaming live on social media. Viewers across the state were commenting in real time, the story spreading faster than wildfire. Maya finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Chief Keller, I appreciate your swift action. I'll file a full report with the Bureau. But understand this, had I not kept my composure, this could have ended tragically." The chief nodded gravely. "Agent Carter, on behalf of this department, I owe you an apology. What happened here was unacceptable." Danvers shook his head, defiant even as his world crumbled. "This is ridiculous. She's twisting the story. You're siding with her because of politics." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Murmurs rose. "We saw everything," one man shouted. "It's all on video," another added. Keller's voice dropped to steel. "Officer Danvers, you're suspended effective immediately. You'll turn in your weapon and face internal affairs. Pray that's all you face." The disgraced officer's lips quivered, but the weight of evidence left him cornered, and in that moment Maya realized this wasn't just a personal confrontation. It was about to ignite something much larger. Within minutes, the videos hit social media platforms. Clips of Danvers holding Maya at gunpoint, the chief ripping the badge from his chest, and the roar of the crowd spread across feeds like wildfire. The captions varied but carried the same weight. "Racist cop holds FBI agent at gunpoint. Watch what happens next." Maya's phone buzzed relentlessly as notifications poured in. Friends, colleagues, even strangers flooded her inbox. Some praised her calmness. Others expressed outrage at the officer's actions. The story wasn't just local anymore, it was national. News outlets scrambled for interviews. Helicopters circled above the town by evening, their spotlights casting beams across neighborhoods. The once quiet highway where the incident happened had reporters lined up, microphones in hand. At FBI headquarters, Maya's supervisor called her directly. "Carter, you handled yourself with commendable restraint, but be prepared, the Bureau will want a full briefing tomorrow. This is bigger than us now." Meanwhile, Chief Keller faced his own storm. His phone rang non-stop with calls from the mayor, the state attorney general, and civil rights groups demanding swift justice. He sat in his office, rubbing his temples, knowing the weight of his choice. He had exposed his department to scrutiny, but also restored a measure of trust. Danvers, however, wasn't done. Stripped of his badge and under suspension, he stormed out of the precinct in civilian clothes. Cameras swarmed him, but he shoved past them, spewing bitter words about witch hunts and federal interference. His anger was raw, his pride shattered, and vengeance simmered beneath the surface. For Maya, the night felt endless. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at the glowing city skyline. She had survived the encounter, but deep down she knew the battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The following morning, the town awoke to chaos. Every newspaper splashed the same headline across its front page: "Officer holds FBI agent at gunpoint. Chief intervenes." At diners, barbershops, and gas stations, the event was the only topic. Some praised Chief Keller for his courage, saying he had restored honor to the badge. Others whispered defensively, insisting Danvers was being unfairly targeted. The community was split, the incident cutting deep into old wounds. Outside the precinct, protesters gathered. Some carried signs that read "Justice for Carter and accountability now." Across the street, a smaller group rallied in support of Danvers, waving flags and shouting that the media was lying. The tension in the air was combustible. Inside, Keller stood at the podium for a press conference. His words were clear, deliberate. "No officer in my department has the right to abuse their authority or let prejudice guide their actions. Officer Danvers' conduct is under full investigation. Let me be clear. Our duty is to protect and serve, not to intimidate and divide." Maya sat quietly in the audience, her presence commanding attention. When the press turned their cameras toward her, she rose and addressed them. "I didn't want this incident to become a spectacle, but I also cannot ignore what happened. I survived because I remained calm, but others might not have been so fortunate. This is bigger than me. It's about ensuring no citizen, no matter their race or status, lives in fear of those sworn to protect them." The room fell into a hushed silence, reporters scribbling frantically, and outside the doors, Danvers watched from afar, his fists clenched, his resentment burning hotter with each word spoken against him. The battle lines had been drawn. By midday, the story reached Capitol Hill. Senators tweeted statements, civil rights leaders gave interviews, and cable news ran non-stop loops of the confrontation. Commentators debated whether Chief Keller's actions marked a turning point in police accountability, or whether it was just another incident soon to be forgotten. Meanwhile, Maya was summoned to FBI headquarters in Washington. The Bureau's director wanted her first-hand account. Sitting in a high-rise conference room, Maya recounted every detail with precision. Danvers' hostility, his words, the weapon aimed at her chest. The officials listened intently, some scribbling notes, others shaking their heads in disbelief. "Agent Carter," the director said solemnly, "you demonstrated professionalism under extreme circumstances. We will stand by you, and we will ensure justice is pursued." Back in the small town, however, Chief Keller faced mounting pressure. The police union called his decision to strip Danvers' badge reckless and humiliating, warning it set a dangerous precedent. Yet civil rights groups rallied behind him, praising his transparency. The chief knew he had walked into a political minefield. Danvers, meanwhile, fueled the fire. He appeared on a local radio show that evening, painting himself as the victim. "I was doing my job," he claimed. "She disrespected my authority. This isn't about racism, it's about federal overreach." His words ignited his supporters, who now saw him as a martyr against a so-called system stacked against officers. But the evidence was undeniable. Videos showed everything: the raised gun, the sneer, the chief's intervention. No editing could erase the truth. And yet, Maya knew truth wasn't always enough. Public opinion could twist, narratives could be hijacked, and justice could be delayed. As night fell, she prepared herself mentally. Because in battles like these, survival wasn't enough. Change had to follow. The days following the incident grew heavier for Maya. Strangers stopped her in the street to thank her for standing strong, but she also noticed the other looks, the glares, the muttered insults under breath. One evening, as she returned to her apartment, She found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a note scrawled in red marker. Go back where you came from before it's too late. No signature. Just hate. Maya stared at the words, her jaw tightening. Fear wasn't unfamiliar to her. She had faced violent criminals before, but this was different. This was personal. Chief Keller was quick to act. When she showed him the note, his face hardened. He's behind this, Keller muttered, almost certain Danvers or one of his supporters was responsible. I'll assign patrols near your place until this blows over. But Maya knew better. This wasn't something that would just blow over. Meanwhile, Danvers grew bolder. Though suspended, he gathered small rallies of loyalists outside the precinct, framing himself as the victim of a witch hunt. His words dripped with venom. They'll destroy any officer who dares to stand his ground. Today it's me, tomorrow it's all of you. His followers cheered, their anger fanned into flame. News outlets picked up his defiance, painting him either as a disgraced racist or a wronged patriot. The divide deepened, and with it came unrest. Late one night, as Maya reviewed her case files at home, she heard a faint noise outside, footsteps lingering too long, the sound of gravel shifting. She moved to the window, scanning the street, her instincts sharp. A shadow slipped into the alley. Her gut told her this wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get much worse. The following morning, Maya met Chief Keller at the precinct. His office looked like a war room, stacks of reports, television screens replaying the viral footage, and phones ringing non-stop. He looked exhausted but unshaken. Maya, he said, motioning her to sit, the threats against you are escalating. We traced one call directly to someone tied to Danvers' rallies. He may not have written the note himself, but he's stirring the pot. He knows exactly what he's doing. Maya leaned forward, her tone resolute. Chief, I can handle myself. But what worries me isn't just my safety. It's the precedent this sets. If Danvers gets away with this, it tells every other officer they can act on prejudice and hide behind the badge. Keller nodded grimly. That's why we have to make an example of him. Internal Affairs has enough evidence for termination, but with the union backing him, it won't be easy. At that moment, the door burst open. An aide rushed in, holding a phone. Chief, you need to see this. Danvers just announced he's holding a press conference outside City Hall. On the screen, Danvers stood at a podium, flanked by supporters holding signs. His voice was fiery. I've been betrayed by my own department. I was protecting my community from a suspicious woman who refused my orders. They call it racism. I call it law enforcement. I will not apologize. The crowd erupted in cheers, drowning out the reporter's questions. Keller's fists clenched on the desk. He's doubling down. He's going to tear this town apart just to save his ego. Maya's eyes narrowed as she watched the broadcast. Then we'll have to be louder, with truth, not hate. The storm had reached its breaking point. The town courthouse overflowed with tension. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters filled every seat. And outside, protesters on both sides chanted until their voices cracked. The disciplinary hearing for Officer Danvers had become the trial of the year. Inside, Maya sat at the witness table, posture straight, face calm. Chief Keller stood nearby, his presence unwavering. Across from them sat Danvers, stripped of his badge but dressed in a pressed suit, his jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Danvers' eyes burned only with defiance. The panel of commissioners entered, their expressions grave. This hearing will determine whether Officer Danvers is permanently removed from duty, the chairwoman announced. Maya was the first called to speak. Rising slowly, she recounted the incident in vivid detail, the flashing lights, the pointed gun, the hostility in Danvers' words. Her voice never wavered. When she finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Danvers' lawyer tried to paint the event as a misunderstanding. My client was acting within the bounds of officer safety. He perceived a threat. Keller cut in sharply, his voice booming. A threat, she showed her badge. He aimed a gun at a federal agent because of prejudice, not protocol. That is not officer safety. That is abuse of power. The crowd erupted, some clapping, others shouting. The gavel slammed for order. Finally, Danvers was asked to speak. He rose, chest heaving. I did what I thought was right. I won't apologize for protecting my town from outsiders who think they can control us. His words dripped with venom. The commissioners exchanged uneasy glances. Maya knew this moment was critical. The decision here would ripple far beyond the courthouse walls. and the world was watching. The commissioners withdrew into a private chamber, leaving the courtroom buzzing like a restless hive. Reporters whispered theories. Supporters on both sides clashed in shouts, and Maya sat still, her hands folded tightly, eyes focused forward. She had faced dangerous men before, but somehow this, waiting for justice, felt heavier. After what seemed like hours, the panel returned. The chairwoman's expression revealed nothing, but the air thickened with anticipation. She lifted a sheet of paper and cleared her throat. After reviewing the evidence, including eyewitness accounts, video recordings and testimonies, this commission finds Officer Daniel Danvers guilty of gross misconduct, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming of law enforcement. Effective immediately, he is terminated from duty. He will also face referral for federal investigation. The room erupted. Some cheered loudly, relief washing over them. Others shouted angrily, storming out in protest. Reporters scrambled to broadcast the ruling, their voices overlapping in a storm of headlines. Danvers' face went scarlet. "You can't do this to me," he roared, slamming his fists on the table. Security officers moved in as he shouted at Maya, spittle flying. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Chief Keller stepped between them, his voice like steel. "It's over, Danvers. You had the chance to serve with honor, and you threw it away. Now you'll face the consequences." As Danvers was escorted out in handcuffs, the sight was undeniable, a once proud officer reduced to a symbol of disgrace. Maya finally exhaled, the weight of weeks lifting slightly from her shoulders. Cameras flashed in her direction, reporters yelling for comment. She stood, raising her voice above the chaos. "Today wasn't about me, it was about accountability. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it begins the healing." And for the first time, silence fell. The courthouse ruling ricocheted across the nation. Evening news anchors dissected every detail, while talk shows debated what the verdict meant for policing in America. Civil rights groups hailed it as a breakthrough moment, while police unions called it a dangerous precedent. In Washington, senators quoted Maya's words on the Senate floor. One read aloud, "Justice doesn't erase pain, but it begins the healing." Her calm statement, captured live, had already gone viral. Millions replayed the clip, sharing it as a rallying cry for reform. Maya, however, avoided the noise. She returned quietly to her FBI office, where her colleagues greeted her with handshakes, hugs, and words of respect. One senior agent said softly, "You reminded us all what integrity under pressure looks like." Chief Keller, too, found himself in the spotlight. Though he received backlash from fellow officers, countless citizens sent letters of support. Some called him the kind of leader law enforcement needed. Yet he remained humble, brushing off praise. "I just did what was right," he told reporters. Danvers, meanwhile, sat in a county holding cell, his defiance replaced by simmering silence. His lawyer announced plans to appeal, but public opinion was firmly against him. The once feared officer had become a national cautionary tale. Late one night, Maya finally allowed herself a moment of stillness. She sat on her balcony, sipping tea, the city lights stretching endlessly before her. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight lift, not gone, but lighter. She knew the fight for justice was far from over. This case was one victory in a much larger war, but in that quiet moment, she let herself breathe, knowing she had stood her ground and changed something bigger than herself. Weeks later, the highway where it all began was quiet again. The same stretch of asphalt that once rang with sirens and shouts now lay bathed in morning light. Maya stood there, invited by Chief Keller for a symbolic ceremony. Reporters gathered, though fewer this time. The frenzy had passed, but the memory remained alive in the hearts of many. Keller approached Maya, holding a small box in his hand. "Agent Carter," he began, his voice carrying both gratitude and gravity. "That day, a badge was disgraced, but today I want to return the symbol of service the right way." He opened the box, revealing a polished honorary badge engraved with the words, "For courage and integrity." The crowd hushed as he placed it in Maya's hands. "This isn't just a token," Keller continued. "It's a reminder that justice isn't about silence or fear. It's about courage to stand when it matters most. You showed that courage, and you held all of us accountable." Maya's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "I didn't stand alone. Truth stood with me, and truth will always outlast hate." The small crowd applauded, some wiping away tears. Cameras captured the moment, not of scandal this time, but of hope. As the ceremony ended, Maya turned once more to the stretch of road. The memory of Danvers' gun, the chief's fury, and the weight of a nation's eyes still lingered there. But now, so did something stronger: resolve. Walking away, she felt lighter. The battle had scarred her, yes, but it had also forged something unshakable. Her story was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation, of a town, a department, and perhaps even a nation. And this time, justice had the final word.